Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal, the show where I usually interview celebrities about their last meals and then dig into the history, culture, or science of those meals with experts from around the world. But today's show is different because I'm the one getting interviewed. If you listen to Your Last Meal, if you follow me on Instagram, if you get my newsletter, or if you are my dry cleaner, gynecologist, or limousine driver, yeah, I have my own limousine and limousine driver. I'm not poor. You probably know that I published my first cookbook in November. It's called Open Sesame, 45 sweet and savory recipes for tahini and all things sesame. And I may be biased, but she is real cute. It has beautiful photos, an incredibly good recipe for chocolate miso whoopie pies with tahini whipped cream, and it is a place where I can finally boss you around about what tahinis to buy and how to make your mediocre hummus so silky and delicious, you will never buy store-bought hummus again. I got to launch Open Sesame into the world on November 13th at Booklarder, which is my favorite bookstore. It is an all cookbook bookstore in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. And if you haven't been and you love cookbooks, it is worth a pilgrimage. Lucky for me, this event sold out. See, now you understand the limo driver. Very rich, very important. But we recorded the talk so you could listen to it now. I am in conversation with my hilarious friend, Becky Selengut. Becky is a Seattle cookbook author, a private chef, podcaster, and cooking instructor. Becky has been cooking professionally for 30 years, and I really respect her taste. So when she told me that she made a couple of recipes from Open Sesame and she loved them, I was relieved that I didn't write a garbage book. Becky's newest cookbook is called Misunderstood Vegetables, and it has been praised by the New York Times, Washington Post, Seattle Times, and named one of the best cookbooks of 2024 by Wired. I will include a link to all of her work in the show notes. Before I hit play on the interview that Becky did with me, I just want to let you know that there are only 2 book events left on the calendar. So if you missed all the others, here is your big chance. I am teaching a cooking class at Seattle's Hot Stove Society on January 25th. That is Seattle chef Tom Douglas's cooking school. And I'm doing my last book talk at the JCC in Mercer Island, Washington on February 2nd. And that one includes bites from the book. And my mom is flying in for that one, so you can get a nice glimpse of Barb. All right, let's get into it. The Open Sesame book launch live at Seattle's Booklarder with me and Chef Becky Selengut.
We couldn't figure out how long we've known each other, but it's probably been 15 or more years. We can't even remember how. But as soon as I met Rachel, except for the fact that she doesn't like sports, that's the only different part about us, we have so much in common, it's kind of freaky. The biggest thing that we have in common, which will seem like nothing to everyone else, is that we both absolutely love sour cream.
We love it so much.
We love sour cream so much. It's like our body flows, our veins flow with sour cream, not blood.
Well, that's what I say when I die. I want to be embalmed with sour cream.
They won't even have to. You already are.
It's already in there.
Sour cream.
Yeah, we call each other sour cream sister.
So
SCS
is when we greet each other. SCS.
Well, she's the only person I've met who likes to eat it with a spoon like I do. It's a real kinship.
And
so we don't need that.
Don't even.
That noise.
There's always someone who says that. Like, okay,
Yeah.
how many of you have been like scraping the bottom of a Greek yogurt container?
Thank you, Mark.
How many?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, what is sour cream if not better yogurt?
Yeah.
Think about that. That's the most important thing I want to get across tonight. But anyway, I am so happy to be the doubly chosen one to interview and talk with Ms. Rachel Belle, who is just a star. I mean, right, you guys?
Yeah.
She's so charismatic, so wonderful, and I love to. I just love that I got to be here with you tonight and celebrate you.
Thank you.
So
I'm so glad that you're here.
And luckily, because it is always a little nerve-wracking when you haven't gotten the book yet and you're asked to do something like this, and then you get the book and you're like, oh God, it sucks. Like, no, that would be bad.
You came up here to say my book sucks.
No, I'm saying how horribly awkward would that be? This book so doesn't suck.
Yeah,
like it is
you.
so good, and it's good for so many reasons. One, which I think is the hardest thing for someone writing cookbooks, and I've written a couple of them, is to get your voice into the book and have it be uniquely you. And this book is uniquely you. It is beautifully designed. It's beautifully written. And I tested some of the recipes this week, and they freaking work beautifully. And I tested her smoothie, tahini pineapple smoothie recipe, and I had it 2 days in a row. And it's my new favorite smoothie. That's all there is to it.
I've had that smoothie almost every day for 8 years.
Yeah,
yeah,
I can see
like
why.
that smoothie. That's good.
Just to get us started, you've been doing like media for 20 years, and now you're doing food media specifically. We'll get into that in a little bit, but right off the bat, like, how did this book deal land in your lap? How did this happen? And why Sesame?
Yes. Well, the person who's responsible for this is right here, Jen. So this is a story about why you should go into the office even if you can work from home. And I am guilty because now I work somewhere where I can work from home and I do it all the time. But when the pandemic happened, I was still working at Cairo Radio, and for 2 years we couldn't have guests in the building, no interviews. And then it got to a point where I felt like it's fine now. I asked our boss, can we have someone in? So I had Jen Warwick, who at the time was the publisher of Sasquatch Books, in for a story I was doing. And we just hit it off immediately, and we chatted for like a half an hour before the interview started. And then we did the interview, and I hear people saying a lot that it's hard to make friends as an adult. This is my strategy. And it works every time.
Not for you.
You just go second grade. I just said, do you want to be my friend? And you said yes. And if we would have done the interview over Zoom, which is what I'd done for 2 years, we probably wouldn't have had a conversation. We would have done the interview, hung up, and then we wouldn't have had the connection. And then 3 months later, I got an email from Jen saying, I heard the podcast you did on tahini, and we're thinking of doing a tahini book. Do you want to write the proposal? And I said, yeah, I do.
But zoom out, not just tahini. Sesame.
All sesame, yeah. And my dad is Israeli, so my blood type is tahini plus. I've been eating it my whole life, and I was like, yeah, this is something I can do. So I feel like it's a way to kind of tell where your passion is, because you sent me a message. I was in the middle of my workday, and I just put everything down and just started coming up with recipes. And I think I wrote 30 recipes in like a half an hour, and I was just like, I can't wait to do this. So it's because of Jen Warwick here that I have this book deal.
Across the street.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we met for the first time across the street. And I have a friend in the audience tonight who recently quit his job because he didn't like working from home and like wants that community to work somewhere where people come in. So I think, there's something to it. Like, things can only happen in person sometimes.
So the tahini thing, you guys had just been thinking about tahini and wanting a cookbook, or where did that come from?
I think our marketing director said something about making something.
It came from capitalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think
True story. Hashtag true story. We don't think there's another sesame cookbook out.
There's tahini, but
There's tahini, but we don't think that anyone's ever written a sesame cookbook in the United States that we know of. You guys, this is a first of its kind. Yeah. We're just gonna go with that. We're gonna go with that.
Yeah.
I love that they asked you this question, and like, tahini, do you want? And you were just like rattling off. I mean, that was what a wonderful kismet moment and a meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing when you guys can do that. And you felt it probably was easeful to write this book. It
really was.
When you're passionate about something.
Yeah, I hear people saying a lot, which kind of bums me out. People say, like, the worst part about writing my book was writing my book. Some people just struggle through the writing part. And I understand, if you work in a restaurant and you're not a writer, that part isn't something you like. But I hear people who are novelists saying that too. I had the best experience. It was so fun to write this. I was a creative writing minor. So writing the head notes was really fun. Because I was asked to write this book, it wasn't my idea, this topic. I thought that I was kind of not ghostwriting, but that I wasn't putting myself into it, and that I was just writing a tahini book. Hi, Mike Lewis. Hi. And my editor, Jill, was like, no, we want you in it. You can put your personality. And I was like, okay, which is why the word fart is in a cookbook.
Okay, so
Fart and like something else, maybe barf, I don't know.
So writing a head note, for those of you who don't know, writing a head note is the part of a cookbook where you get to put a little bit of your personality in it. Some publishers are very supportive of that. Like Sasquatch. Some publishers really just want you to create a mood, give tips for how other ways to use the recipe, set a scene. But maybe it's because I published with Sasquatch years prior to you. I don't want to take credit for this, but they had to say no to a bunch of my head notes.
Really?
Because I am just like you.
Yeah.
And I was trying to put all kinds. So the quick story I wanted to tell tonight is how
You walked so I could run.
Exactly. Young friends, please listen to the time where I wanted to call a recipe of mine Bad Jew Stew.
Yes!
And they would
said
not.
no.
Sasquatch said, hell no.
I don't know if you guys would have put bad juice stew. Probably not.
But they let me put it in the head note with the note. My editors wouldn't let me call this recipe Bad Jew Stew.
Yeah.
So
what
that's
is that stew? Is it like shrimp and pork?
It's mussels and bacon and Israeli couscous.
Yeah. My book is on Amazon right now of like a top trending kosher book, and I was like, there's a lot of shrimp in there.
So I think that you should totally read your intro to the whoopie pie.
Okay.
Because this is the one where you got to work.
Yes.
I mean, people are dying to know, how did you get fart into a head note?
It's a little bit up here.
Is it?
It's the first
Do you
one
know
I was
your
a
book?
dessert. Yeah,
Do you know your book?
I do know her.
Oh my goodness.
Keep
Get in
going,
there,
keep
get
going,
in
keep
there.
going, keep going.
Okay.
Page 111. You're on.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so this is the chocolate miso whoopie pies with tahini whipped cream. And that's one of the great things about tahini is that it's just so good in desserts and savory things. It can kind of be in anything. Okay, a fact I think about often. Whoopi Goldberg named herself after the whoopee cushion when she was repeatedly teased for passing gas on stage. It's true.
Time out. I did not know that.
You
That
must
is
not-
a strange
You must
fact.
not cruise Wikipedia.
I've always wondered why she was called Whoopi, and I never looked it up.
I thought about it one day and was like, oh, I could look this up. And I couldn't believe that was why.
Where was she
named
passing
herself
gas?
on stages across the country.
What?
Like maybe when she was doing stand-up? I don't know.
She's just farting
She was
away?
farting away, and
Okay.
she was like, I'm gonna name myself that. I don't know.
Crazy. Okay.
A comforting fact, there are 0 farts in these whoopie pies. A third fact, whoopie pies aren't pies at all. They are tender little cakes, usually sandwiching buttercream or marshmallow fluff. These whoopie pies are filled with fluffy whipped cream, sweetened with maple, and flavored with nutty tahini. Turns out, miso, chocolate, and tahini are a match made in heaven. If you don't love a saccharine dessert, you'll appreciate the balance of salty miso and lightly sweetened cream.
So you get around to describing the recipe, but
Yeah.
I love, like, you and I write the same kind of head notes.
Do
like,
we?
oh
Well, yeah, I've
God,
read
yeah,
your
like
books,
just
yeah.
like, just
Yeah.
be, we're ourselves.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
12-year-old selves.
I know, and it just kind of did, it sounds cheesy, but it did flow.
It does flow
It
because-
flowed out of me like a fart flew out of Whoopi.
Exactly.
What
Wow.
if she was here?
So I do remember when I first met you that you told me how much you love the pun.
Did I love what?
Punning.
Oh, yeah.
And weren't you doing, like, you went on site to some sort of pun?
I went to Austin and competed in a pun fest.
A pun fest.
Yeah.
And at that time I met you, I was like, puns are the lowest form of humor.
You used to think that?
I
I
did.
didn't know that.
And now I think the pun thing is like comes with age. I think you're
Not
just an
for
old
me.
soul. You're
Yeah.
an old soul.
Yeah.
And now I think puns are pretty funny to the point where I'm like, what sesame or tahini puns have you come up with?
Oh my God, I haven't even thought about this.
I'm putting you on the spot because I know you've competed.
Well, earlier today you were telling me that you had a tahini surgery.
Oh God, it's so bad, y'all. I don't think I'm there yet. I think that gets a tahini.
Well, that's what you think, but if it was up to Sesame, I'd have a different
Jesus
opinion.
Christ, no.
My other partner in pun is right here, Kennedy. We do this. This is what we like to
Okay. Any
do.
others?
Do you want to hum us a little tune?
No, I really
Okay.
would rather not. I don't have a pun. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at it at all.
After the break, I talk about my biggest recipe testing fails, and Becky and I play a round of would you eat it? As in, I found this lint-covered cookie in the pocket of my coat. Would you eat it? We'll be right back.
Let's kind of get more into like your personal history because when you were on Cairo, right?
Yeah.
You for 20 years.
15.
15 years. You were doing all kinds of reporting. Food was part of it, but you were
Yeah.
doing all kinds of.
Well, when I started, I was doing hard news. I was doing murders, breaking news, court cases, all of that. And after a few years, I was just thinking, this is not me. This is not what I want to be doing. It was sad. It was depressing. And also like doing breaking news, it's a lot of work. Like you're out in your car all day. Like, I was peeing in bushes and just like eating in 7-Elevens. And I didn't want to do that anymore. But then I was on Ron and Don's show on Cairo for 10 years. And I got to do feature reporting. And that's when I could start to kind of sneak food in. But it wasn't conscious. It's just what I'm interested in. So I always was trying to just put it in wherever I could.
Towards the end of your time there, were you mostly doing like features plus some general stuff? Or?
I was only doing features, and then I started the podcast at Cairo. So that's where I got my food outlet. 8 years ago, I started Your Last Meal.
Your Last Meal.
Yeah. And when I started doing that, I was like, oh my God, I finally get to do this. Because I wanted to be in food media for probably 15 years, maybe more. Because I started food writing when I was 21, and I always did something in the background. Like I was either food writing, I would, anything anyone asked me to do, I would judge a chowder competition. I judged the Spam cook-off at the Puyallup County, or the Washington State Fair at Puyallup. Twice or 3 times. So yeah, that was kind of the thing, was just saying yes and then getting to know people in the industry, and then they start asking you to do things. So it took me a long time.
And so you were doing Your Last Meal concurrent with still doing work at Cairo.
Yeah.
And then what led to the next step in your evolution of your career? Meaning, like, did you get fired?
No, I didn't get fired. Let's see. Honestly, I can't talk about some of it, but I left on my own accord, and I was allowed to take my podcast with me, which is very unusual to take intellectual property. I was able to do that, and because I could, I had this thing that I could make money doing, and I could leave and do that. So I left. I did it on my own for 7 months, and I had sponsors, but I knew the whole time that I was going to be starting my new job like 7 months later at Cascade PBS. So they picked up the podcast, and then they said, it was so funny. They were like, well, if we pick it up, you have to have a TV show too, and you have to like come up with the whole thing. And I was like, okay, like, yeah. So I got to design this food show that I do now, The Nosh.
So great.
And then Jen got in touch with me. It was just like this weird, I don't believe in woo-woo stuff, but I do believe that you have to open up space for something to come in. If you're doing your job, like people don't always know that you're looking for something else, or I don't know what it is, but as soon as I left, things just started happening. I got that other job offer, I got this book deal, and I was like, what is happening? I felt like I used up all my karma, and I have to help like 30,000 old ladies cross the street to build it back up.
I think that seems fair.
I do too. Yeah.
But it's also, there is a certain kind of easefulness when there's a kind of match with what your passion is and what the world needs at the same time. So it kind of seems like you've just finally met up with where your talent is meeting what's needed from you.
I think it's, it's part luck and it's part experience. Like I've lived here for almost 20 years. I feel part of the community, knowing people, but then it still might not happen. So I think it is just, I don't know, part of it is just chance and luck.
Also your personality. I mean, you're a natural, you're really charismatic, and you make people feel at ease. Like I've been interviewed by you a couple times, and I always, like, we would laugh, and it felt easeful and fun. And I think that makes for a really good interview. And so basically that's your job, is to put people at ease, make people feel comfortable, bring out their essential, essence, their oils.
Yeah.
Bring out their essential oils.
Everyone's real shiny when they're done with me.
Render them down to their juiciest suet, and then... I don't know. And then, is that kosher?
I don't know. I was just thinking, like, what next? Like, put them in the mortar and pestle and just pound them out. But then that gets gross, and like we're recording this. And okay. Next,
she said, pound them out. I just want to say that out loud. Okay, so that's kind of, you're living your dream right now. Much.
I really am.
You're working your
my
dream.
Dream career. Yeah,
you're doing everything you want to do, and you're in multiple media now. You're TV, podcasting, which we can call radio because it's essentially audio, right? It's similar. It's radio adjacent, and print media.
Yeah. My cookbook came out on the same day as Martha Stewart's 100th cookbook.
Amazing.
I know.
You look so much alike too.
I know.
That's just strange.
Yeah. I mean, mine did better than hers.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Martha.
For sure.
No, I want to write another cookbook.
What topic?
Because I loved writing this so much, like I said, and we just had this dream team. Like, I have done a lot of creative ventures throughout my life, and it never gelled like it did with this project. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but it's like everyone has different ideas. Sometimes, you're good friends with someone, you're like, oh, we have the same sense of humor, we like the same stuff, and you start working together, and you're like, no, you know, like you don't really like their ideas or like their work ethic is
Which
different.
is right here.
I know. Awkward. And this was like, we were on the same page the whole time, literally. I've never had that happen before. Like we made a mood board and it was bright colors, humor. Like we wanted kind of a little bit of an Amy Sedaris vibe, which is like how I got this picture in. Where is it? This was the one that we were like, well, we can do a little whimsy.
I'm gonna hold it up for
That's the hot pink hummus, by the way. But yeah, like it came out better than I could have imagined. Like I love the way that the typography is and the photography is beautiful. I mean, it just worked. And so I had a really good experience.
Look at Rachel's dress. And then look at...
I didn't even know.
And this was not
know.
planned. And I said, God, your dress is perfect for the
I
book.
didn't
And she's
notice
like, I didn't
that.
even notice that.
There's my mother's name, Lodge.
So we both have, Barbara is our mother's names.
We're DOBs, daughters of Barbara. Anybody else a DOB? Yeah, my DOB. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Love it.
I had an experience once where I was interviewing a famous musician and he said his mom was Barbara. And I went, oh, you're an SOB. And then I went, oh no. Like a son of,
So in writing a cookbook, 45 recipes in this
Yeah.
book, you have to do an awful lot of testing. Were there any like massive like failures? Like was there something that you're like, I have this idea in my head, this is gonna be a great recipe, it's something I haven't yet made, but I know it's gonna be good, and then you're just like, this is crap.
Yeah.
And then we'll get, because all these are amazing, but I always like hearing the stories of like, what went wrong?
So when you write a proposal, at least for the cookbook, I didn't have to write, a whole chapter, but I had to write a whole table of contents and just write 45 recipes that were gonna be in the book. And since this wasn't my original idea, it's not like I'd been thinking about this for years. I didn't have a bunch of recipes that was my dream and my hope chest. So I like made them all up. Like there was a few things that I'd made before. There's a pita chip nachos with a tahini feta queso and shawarma. So then when I started making them, I was like, no. Some of them I didn't even make because I just kept looking at it and I never wanted to make it. And I was like, I don't even want to test this. No one's going to want to eat it. Which Jill is sad that she still wants one of those ones I never tested.
Which is?
It was like a lasagna pasticcio kind of mashup where it was like the meat was going to be Middle Eastern spiced and then there was going to be a tahini bechamel.
Yeah.
But I don't know why, it made me tired every time I thought about it.
It sounds complicated,
right?
Yeah.
But the biggest failure ended up working. So there's a cake in here that's a vanilla cake made with almond flour and maple syrup. And it's based on a cake that I've made before. But I wanted to tahinify it. So I first, I'll take out half the fat that it calls for and then I'll put in tahini because tahini's so oily. It was supposed to bake for 25 minutes. I left it in for an hour and a half. It was still raw. I took it out and it just went like poof. And I was like, what's wrong with you? Like I couldn't figure it because I was Googling, like
chemistry, man.
How do you do this? And that's the thing, like baking is so much different than cooking because when you're testing recipes for savory things or non-baked things, you can add a little bit, you can like,
easily
fix it while you're doing it. But with this, it's like, you just have to wait till it comes out. So I made this like 4 times and I hate waste.
Me too.
Will eat a peanut that I found behind my fridge from 9 years ago. Like, I don't care. I'm like, I don't want to throw it away.
I have a game with my friend. What would you still eat if you found it in your pocket?
Oh,
we have a game.
really?
We, like when we're in a car trip, we're like, we go back and forth. Like, okay, what are those little Starlight mints? What are those?
Oh, yeah,
If it was unwrapped, little bit of lint,
unwrapped.
would you eat it?
I couldn't wash it. And there's lint.
We're in the car.
I don't
You're
really
hungry.
want the lint. I could if you could chip it off.
Yeah.
I would eat it.
I'd still eat it.
Yeah.
Jolly Rancher, the wrapper's half on, half off in your pocket. Would you eat it? You have to always go, would you eat it?
Would you eat it? Let's
you
play
eat
that
it?
tonight. Would you eat it?
Would you eat it? Okay, like
I think if there's dirt stuck to it, that's my limit. But
That's
if I
your
can
limit.
just go like, then it's
sesame
okay.
cracker wrapped, but real old, maybe rancid.
You know what? I kind of like
Would
some
you eat
stale
it?
things. I like stale graham crackers better than regular ones, and I decant them. I open the bag and I let them stale, and then I eat them.
Next question.
Who wants to have s'mores? Okay, so this cake. So I made it 4 times, and they were inedible every time. So I had to compost every one. I couldn't eat it. And I felt so guilty. I have this memory, this like dun like a death march, because I didn't want to put it in my in-house compost. And I was like, just put it in the big dumpster. It was just like slow motion and the sad music playing. It was like, goodbye, stupid cake. I was given 5 months to write the book, and I ended up having 6, but it's not very much time. And while I was I know.
Oh, it is a small book, though.
While I was testing recipes, I was listening to different food podcasts, and one of them's called Everything Cookbooks. And there happened to be 2 episodes that I heard with people testing recipes. One was Melissa Clark. The other one was Alana Reagan. Melissa Clark was saying that she tests baked goods. I think she said she'll test things 50 times. And I was like, I don't have time for that.
Where's the
money and the time. I was like, I have to keep going. Like, there's a point where I have to give up. And then the other cook said that she spent a year perfecting, what was it? It was like maybe just a loaf of sourdough bread. I was like, I don't have a year. So for that one, I ended up calling my friend Simone, who's a home baker, but a really good baker. I actually consulted many people. Brian's mom's she was a home ec teacher. I called her. My friend finally kind of cracked it. So yeah, thanks, Simone.
Did you have like recipe testers for each recipe, or did you just test them yourself? You did.
Yeah, but usually I would send the recipe once I got it to the best point that I could get it. It usually wasn't like, this is a failure, fix it.
Right.
And there's a lot of recipe testers in this room. But yeah, that's how it worked. Was once I got a recipe to the point that I thought it was as good as I could get it, I would send it to somebody, either like who I thought it would be good for, or I had this email list and I just said, who wants this one? I picked my most type A home cook friends, of which I had 25. I was surprised. These people were amazing, like Kennedy in particular right here. The notes that I got back, it was so helpful. And like Jess, like there's a lot of extra credit testers in the crowd.
Isn't it interesting that when you think you've written something so clearly, and then you send it out to recipe testers, and then they come back and they're like, what did you mean when you said, like, it's not clear? And I'm like, no, that's not clear at all.
Or even things like I forgot to say baby bok choy, and it said bok choy. So like she bought the big thing and then it was not good.
I had the same problem in my book.
Did?
Yep, absolutely. My brother was one of my testers because he's really anal retentive. They're the best testers.
Them too.
And he came back and he's like, this did not cook in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It was really soggy and yucky. And I was like, what kind of baby bok choy? He goes, baby?
Yeah,
bok choy?
exactly.
And I was like,
oh no. And that's the thing, there's like a method for testing. So when I got my book deal, I was actually in the middle of testing a friend's book. It's for sale here. It's a soup cookbook I'm looking at right now called Seconds by Caroline Wright. And I was supposed to test the entire book, but I had to stop because I had to start my own book. But she was a professional chef. She worked for Martha Stewart. She did a lot of recipe testing. So she like taught me this formal way to do it. Everything kind of lined up because then that helped me develop recipes. And then I could tell my testers how to do it. So it's kind of less about like, do you like it? Do you not like it? It's more about, okay, I said that this takes 15 minutes. Set a timer. When it hits 15 minutes for you, like, is it burnt? Is it raw? Like things like that. Yeah, I got a lot of good fixes.
And then at the end of the form, you say, would you eat it?
Would you eat it? Then I take what they made and I drop it on the ground.
If it was in your pocket in a car and you're hungry, would you eat it?
Would you eat it? You got to make that face and that voice.
Would you eat it?
Yeah.
So you taught me something new about sesame. So like I've been a chef for 30 years. I've never known exactly how sesame seeds grew in a pod similar to okra. It looks a lot like okra. Black sesame seeds are black little seeds in the pod. That's really cool. I never thought about it. But
and I think they dry them and they like
thrash them.
Yeah.
Or thrash them.
They thrash them.
It's a hard word to say without spitting.
I told you this was a splash zone.
But you taught me that there's a certain type of sesame. This is for the nerds in the room, like myself. A certain type that the best sesame and tahinis come from.
Yes. So a part of my mission with making this book is to make sure people use good sesame or good tahini. I've had friends, even before I wrote this book, a friend messaged and was like, why did this turn out so bad? And I was like, what brand did you use? Because they all are so different. And so what is believed to be the best sesame seeds in the world is from the Humera region of Ethiopia. And some countries exclusively use it. The only one I know of is Israel and Palestine, both. Like that's the only sesame seed they get imported there. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because I looked up where all these brands that I liked were from, because they don't say on the bottle all the time. I was like, they're all from Israel, Palestine. And so I guess I think those are the best in the world as well. But yeah, that's why actually we're selling them here, because I just wanted to make sure that people like had a leg up when they're making something, that it's going to turn out good, because
And for so many years, when we would go to buy tahini at stores, it would be like if the equivalent of going to buy peanut butter and all you get is chunky Skippy. There's no other choices. That's all you get.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that chunky Skippy isn't good for people who like chunky Skippy, but like
stop saying chunky Skippy.
chunky Skippy. It sounds really weird just to keep saying chunky Skippy.
Would you eat it?
Would you eat chunky Skippy if it was in your pocket? There was a little fluff on it? No. So now we have a diversity of tahini.
Yeah.
Is it tahini if it's plural?
Well, in Hebrew, I think it's tahinim.
Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds right. Anyway, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You didn't think you were gonna be able to flex on that, did you?
Tahinim.
Hummus.
Hummus.
Hummus. So it's nice to be able to have a choice. When I was growing up in the 70s, my dad is not a cook, but for some reason, probably someone was dating, I have no idea, he started making hummus from scratch.
Oh.
And he made literally nothing else. But this is
Really?
something that he would make. And the choices of tahini that we had were very poor. Probably
Yeah.
the same one that we were maligning earlier before. But he taught me how to make hummus when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
And
is it good?
Oh, it's
Do you
great.
like it?
Yeah, absolutely. But it was with a poor quality tahini. So now it's so lovely to have all these different choices.
Yeah.
Is there something that you learned about sesame in general through writing this book that you think most people don't know that they might want to know about?
Well, I said the part about Ethiopia.
Sure, that's cool. Do you want my glasses to appear more like
Yeah, let's see
nerdy?
if something comes to me. I don't know. I have to think about
That's a
that.
good idea.
But this is, so blurry.
Or cooking with it, like
I learned-
refrigerator, mixing it when you get it home in the food processor, and then putting it back in.
That's something that's good. So, sometimes it's like so clumpy and it's like clay. Well, there's two things that could happen. It's kind of hard to know if you should fix it or throw it out. So look at the expiration date. I know it sounds obvious, but I don't really do that all the time. And I went to, like a international market and I bought 5 different ones and I got home and like 2 of them were expired. And then one of them wasn't expired, but it had the date that it was made and it was 1.5 years old. So look at that. And then if it's not old and gross, but it's just kind of clay, just put it in a little food processor and blend it. And then just pour it back in. It's very satisfying.
It's very satisfying.
Yeah. And then the best thing to do, because it also gets very stodgy and it tightens up. Like if you've ever, made hummus or even just like some kind of tahini dressing, cold water. You could even put an ice cube in, like that makes the hummus fluffy. But yeah, cold water and just like a little bit at a time and then it will loosen up. So things like that. I did an interview yesterday and an interview today, and both times someone yesterday didn't know what tahini was, and the woman I did a cooking segment with today had never tried it. It's just ground sesame seeds.
It's peanut butter
That's
without sugar.
it.
It's like
Yeah.
just sesame butter.
And usually no salt and
salt,
no
yeah.
added oil. So that's what's interesting. They taste so different. I did a side-by-side taste test recently when I did Tom Douglas's show, and everyone tasted so different. So I don't know, if you're someone who likes to go to those kind of markets, it's kind of a fun thing to do with your friends, like do a blind taste test and see which one you like.
I always like the most expensive one. I hate that about myself.
You're fancy.
I
You're
am
fancy.
so fancy. And I loved your book because I think most people these days who are considered themselves cooks will make hummus with their tahini and they will make salad dressings with their
Yeah.
tahini. And then they sort of get stymied. They don't know
Yeah.
what else to do with their tahini. So the fact, and I'm a chef and I use tahini for those 2 things
Yeah.
and not a lot of other things. And so reading through your book, I'm like, oh my God, my smoothie game is on point.
Yeah.
And there's a recipe in here for a kabocha squash, which is my favorite squash, with a miso tahini drizzle on it. Like, how could that
That's really-
be
that's
bad?
drinkable.
That's almost like
It's really
cheating
good.
to put miso
I
with
know.
tahini. And then you have chili crisp in there too. I'm like, you're just cheating.
good. It's
Did
good.
you add like brown butter in there too?
I mean, I could.
You could.
I could.
It's like
I
all
could.
the cheaters.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the first line of the book is the question, have you ever finished a jar of tahini? Like in this room, have you ever finished a whole jar? 7 people, yeah.
How many people have moved houses with a jar of tahini?
Oh, I have done that.
I have definitely moved a jar of
I've
tahini.
a lot of foods and
Yeah.
never eaten them again.
Do you want to
Yeah.
tell everybody what the bad tahini brand is?
No.
No? You don't wanna go there?
Well, I feel bad doing that, but it is so bad. They just followed me on
Do you want me to?
Instagram.
Do you want me to tell
Yeah,
them?
you do it.
Okay, it's.
I did it.
Sorry, no, I did it.
I feel bad, but also it's so bad. Like when we
It's
did
not
the
good.
side-by-side taste test, we did it blind and everyone picked that for their last one.
I don't think you should feel bad because if someone's putting out a crap product, then they deserve it. Zoom is a great story behind them and
Sister owned.
Sister-owned,
Yeah.
and they're out of New York, I think, yeah?
Philly.
Close enough. And
They're the Will Smith of tahinis.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they're doing great. And they have an organic line now, and
Yeah, I list all of them in here, all my favorites, but like one of my favorites you can get at Fred Meyer. I found one at Town and Country, so like they're out there. Yeah.
we're at the time for Q&A.
Ooh!
So we can open it up for questions.
We'll jump into audience questions right after this quick break. All right, let's rejoin my conversation with Becky Selengut at Book Larder with the audience Q&A. The first question is, what role have cookbooks played in my life?
I remember looking through my mom's cookbooks a lot when I was younger. Then as an adult, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room because you're sitting in this bookstore that you bring them into bed and you like to read them like a book. I read every head note and I even like read through the recipes. I just like to read them. When I was writing my head notes, I was thinking like, what would I like to read as far as making it more entertaining? Also with like knowledge in there, but sometimes head notes I find this isn't telling me anything. There's no tips about the recipe. It's not entertaining. It's just kind of there. I was aiming for entertainment and knowledge.
You hit it, at least to me. I think your voice shines very bright.
Thanks, Sour Cream Sister.
Yeah.
Hi.
The question was, what are your favorite recipes in the book?
Oh, it's such a hard one.
I know, but people, always go
Yeah,
like,
they
I
always
can't
do.
pick a favorite child. Like, if I had children, I'd be like, you're my favorite. I always have that.
Wow.
Yeah. The first one that
Glad
comes
you didn't
to
have
mind.
kids.
I know.
One of my favorite recipes from the book is the lime basil pasta with sesame chicken bolognese.
Basically, you soak cashews, you blend them with a lot of basil and a lot of lime, and it's just like this really
Sesame
creamy,
chicken.
very limey sauce. And then it's ground chicken with all of the classic Asian flavors of fish sauce, sesame oil, there's tahini, there's soy, and then you mix that in and then you saute green beans and then mix that in too. That one is so good. And then you sprinkle cashews on top. Just every time I make it, when people come over, everyone eats the whole thing. Like it's like seconds and thirds.
Did you
Definitely a
use
favorite.
cashews to kind of appeal to the vegans with the chicken?
Yes.
Or the trick question.
It makes it so creamy
Yeah.
without using cream, which I wasn't
Exactly.
avoiding, but it is so nice.
It's nice to shake it up so
Yeah.
people are lactose intolerant or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of nutrition
There's
in
a
it.
taste
I
good.
make seafood chowders now with cashew cream, not
Oh, you
just
do?
because I think
Yeah.
that they're so delicious. And sometimes you just don't have cream at home, but if you always keep cashews in your
Cashews, which I
pantry,
do.
and
Yeah.
you always have fresh cream available,
it's
which is
true.
kind of nice.
The other one that I really love is the congee, which is the first recipe in the book. It's so good. It's so savory, and it starts with rice that's already cooked, so it takes way less time. And then you can use your leftover rice.
Hi, just wanted to pop in and tell you a little bit more about this recipe. It is congee with sesame soy mushrooms and jammy Korean marinated eggs. I'm not exactly sure the pronunciation, but in Korean, these eggs are called mayak gyeran.
In Korean, it translates to drug eggs because they're so addictive.
The eggs are marinated overnight with soy sauce, water, garlic, sesame oil, rice vinegar, honey, and jalapenos.
And so it turns the egg brown, and then you cut it open. So they're like 7-minute eggs, and it's all gooey. Oh my God, it's so good.
And I very specifically instruct to cut the mushrooms into quarters and not to slice them.
There's something about cutting mushrooms in quarters instead of slices that it changes the texture, it changes the flavor. Like they get so browned and they soak up the sauce, and it has this like juicy meatiness. You've written cookbooks, you go, God, I hope they do what I told them to do. You know what I mean?
I do.
You can't control what people are gonna do and people change it, but I'm like, I hope they don't slice the mushrooms. That's my wish. Quarter the mushrooms.
I sometimes write that into the recipe
do.
itself. I'll
Don't
say,
you do
I'll
it.
say, you're cooking scallops, turn the heat to high. Now you're going to read this and you're going to turn it from high to medium because you're going to be scared.
Don't do
Turn
it.
it back up to high.
Yeah.
Like I actually,
You know what they're gonna do.
I know what
Yeah.
they're going to do.
The question was, do you want to write more cookbooks?
Well, I had an idea before I was approached for this one. So when I think back on this, I'm like, you're so tacky. We had our first meeting and I was like, by the way, I have my own idea and this is what it is in case you want to do this later. I just couldn't hold it in. I want to do, if you know me, this makes sense. I want to do an outdoors cookbook where it's like hiking food, van food, camping food. Not as much like backpacking food with like, powders and stuff. But whenever I post on Instagram what I make, people always go, oh, you cook better outside than I make at home. And I'm like, oh, then maybe I should put it in a book.
Do they all talk like that?
They do. Yeah, see? Yeah, there's a lot of mid-Atlantic typing. Yeah. So that's what I want to do. So I'm working on that proposal now.
Wow, you're
Now.
getting right
TikTok,
into it.
I know. I'll get it done by the end of the year.
Good question here?
Yeah.
This question came from my buddy and recipe tester, Kennedy. She said after she tested the basil lime pasta, it has become a part of her regular recipe rotation for her family. She makes it all the time, but she has adapted it along the way. So her question is, what do I think about folks adapting recipes from cookbooks?
I mean, it's kind of out of your hands once it's released into the world. People say, make it first how the recipe said to make it and then do your variation. I think you can do whatever you want, but if it doesn't turn out right and you did the variations, then it's your fault. Yeah, I mean, it's like all those New York Times comments in the recipes. It's like,
so funny.
I substituted peanuts for goat cheese.
Right?
And it's like,
I used figs for prosciutto. This recipe sucks.
It called for a suckling pig, but I had a popsicle.
Right?
So,
It's so true. And you're just laughing at them.
And they're like, and it didn't work. So, that's not my fault.
I had someone take a rice pilaf recipe of mine, white rice, and then they said it doesn't work. This recipe does not work. And they wrote me, it sucks. And then I said, well, what kind of rice you use? I said, this has been a really well-tested recipe. For years I've been teaching this. I don't, And they're like, finally, could it be that it was brown? And I was like, it's all just a color. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing too, that it's a little stressful writing it. Like if you really care about, I really thought about the readers. I hope everyone who writes a cookbook does think about who's going to make them, because once I sent it off, I started spiraling. Are these all garbage recipes? Maybe they all suck. I don't know. Because there's things you can't control, like people's stoves work differently, their ovens work differently, they live in different regions, they're getting different brands and products.
Popping in again because something happened last week that is so relevant to this that I think is important to pass along. In the beginning of the cookbook, I state that I tested all of the recipes with Diamond kosher salt, and that if you're using Morton's, you should use half of the amount. I don't know what the difference would be if you use sea salt or other brands of salt, but it does make a difference. And I learned that last week when a friend had a potluck. Everybody very sweetly was making recipes from my book, and someone brought the falafel spice tahini deviled eggs with crispy chickpeas, which is a delicious recipe. And she said, I don't think I did your recipe justice. It's really salty. And at first I got nervous that the recipe called for too much salt. But I actually made them twice the week before for live TV appearances, and they turned out good. I took a bite of one of her deviled eggs, and it was so salty, it was practically inedible. Nobody really ate them. And we finally figured out that it was because she used Morton salt, which means it was twice as salty as it should be. I don't blame her because I don't always read the introductions to books. I often just flip to a recipe and I make it. But this is a very good example of how a recipe could turn out poorly because people are working with different ingredients. And I think back to recipes that I have made in the past that I thought were bad recipes when it could have been another factor.
Yeah.
I do what I can. I can only do so much.
You can only do so much.
Yeah.
This was recorded in mid-November, so the next question was asking if there are any recipes in the book that I'd recommend making for the holidays.
So the roasted kabocha squash, that's very fall. For desserts, there's the last recipe that I made for the book, which is why there's no picture, because it was like, we need one more. And it actually turned out really good, is, let me see, the cheesecake. I don't remember the full name. Goat cheese, honey, and tahini cheesecake, and there's pistachios in the crust. It's really good. I feel like that would be a good holiday dessert. Yeah. And this recipe is funny. Like, my mom didn't make homemade desserts. She didn't bake. We got our cookies from the Girl Scouts and the brownies from the box. But she made a cheesecake. That was the only thing she made. And she shingled it with the kaleidoscope of kiwis on top. And so I was thinking about it, and I asked her, where did you get that recipe? And like, how did this become the only thing you made? And of course, it was from some spiral bound from my dad's work. Like, all the wives contributed a recipe. And then when I made it as is, it did not work. And I was like, how did hers always work? So I just changed every part of it. I kind of was just inspired. There's half goat cheese, half cream cheese. There's honey instead of sugar. And then the pistachios and the tahini. It's really good. It's very creamy, and you don't do a banh mi. There's no banh mi's in either. You don't have to do that water bath. You just bake it like normal, and it comes out so silky smooth.
Ooh, how'd you learn that you didn't have to do a water bath?
I didn't do one.
You just forgot? It didn't work out?
I didn't forget. I just put it in, and I was like, sweet.
I love that.
Like, I'm just gonna do it this way.
Okay, that's
My mom
amazing.
said it would work. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yes. How long did it take to do the photos? So I was there only for 2 days, and there's just so many interesting behind the scenes magic of like what you're looking at and what it really was happening. The photographer was also the stylist, and she came over and she just brought all of her dishes, and I guess I can spoil the magic. Anytime you see tile, it's a piece of vinyl. Show the one with the soup, the noodle soup. Like, it looks like I'm sitting at a counter and I'm sitting on the floor of my living room with a piece of plywood. This one? Oh, no, the one inside with like the noodle soup. So I was present for those, and I chose recipes that I felt like I knew how I wanted it to be styled. Like, for example, the hummus, with Israeli hummus, they like make this kind of well, and I wanted it to look like that, and so I did those recipes. But then she did the rest on her own in her studio in Bellingham, and she cooked, styled, and photographed all of the rest, which means like 40, 39. And so she just did that over a period of time, like probably a few a day. Yeah, this one, like, doesn't that look like I'm really sitting at a counter? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I do also want to point out, my family background is because my dad's from Israel. Tahini has been around way longer than that. You know, people in Syria, Egypt, Palestine, basically that whole Fertile Crescent has been eating it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So I just want to make that clear. This is just my perspective and my family story. And, you know, when people from Eastern Europe or whatever immigrated to Palestine, it became Israel, they just adopted those foods. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Can I clap at me? Oh, can I just say one more thing? I'm gonna try not to cry, but I don't know if I can. Maybe I shouldn't.
I can do it
Thank
for
you guys
you too.
for coming. It's so meaningful. I don't take any of this for granted that you're supporting my work. You know what? When you're working on something that's important to you, and if it's important to other people, that's amazing. It really is. Like, think about, a lot of us in this room make stuff, and artists and musicians, and people don't come to everything and every show or whatever. And the support that I've gotten from everyone in this room, like when I got the deal, while I was working on it, until now, like, I appreciate it so much. It really means a lot, and I feel so a part of this community that I've lived in for almost 20 years. So thank you so much. I really love you guys. Okay.
Quickly before signing.
Oh, one more thing with the signing part. Years ago, one of Becky's books, I went to her signing and I asked her to make it out to Michelle Obama, because I thought someday when I'm dead and the book is at a used bookstore, someone will be like, oh my God, I got Michelle Obama's book. So I'll write whatever you want in there is what I'm saying. Whatever you want.
If you want to come to a live event, go to hellorachelbelle.com and click on the events tab, or you can find a link in the show notes. Like I said at the start of the show, there are only 2 events left on the calendar. Open Sesame is for sale at lots and lots of indie bookstores across the country. You can also pick it up at Barnes & Noble or Williams-Sonoma and all of the big online sellers. If you want a signed copy, there are a few places you can get it, both in person and online at Book Larder in Seattle and at Powell's Books in Portland. And you can pop into Half Seas Wine Shop in Seattle and get a signed copy there. We would be so grateful if you left a review of Open Sesame on Amazon. You can leave a review even if you bought the book elsewhere. Your Last Meal is a product of Seattle's Cascade PBS. This episode was mixed and mastered by Sarah Bernard. Special thanks to Booklarder for letting me use your fancy mics. Original theme music by Prom Queen. I created, host, and co-produce Your Last Meal. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with a very special guest who wants you to know she is still making new music.
It's always a bit bittersweet to hear, as I do often, I loved you in the 90s, or you got me through high school. And of course, I've been making music ever since, 10 or 15 records full of songs since then. It's weird, but it's also fine and kind of beautiful.
I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal.
I really wanted Becky to interview me, and I was just thinking, you are my chosen one, and just a chosen one.
A chosen one.
Yeah, we are.
We are the chosen ones.
Yeah, we are the chosen ones, and you're my chosen one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel doubly chosen.
Yes.